Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Two snap elections in both the UK and France left a number of surprises. We have the results and the details. The Israel Defense Forces have taken out a major Hezbollah commander. TBN Israel's Yair Pinto will explain. And Environment Canada's issued heat warnings for many regions of the country as the heat wave is hitting with full force.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. French President Emmanuel Macron has refused the resignation of his country's prime minister, asking him to remain as the head of the government following chaotic results which left the government in limbo. French voters split the legislature on the left, center, and right, leaving no faction even close to the majority needed to form government. The results from Sunday's vote raised the risk of paralysis for the European Union's second largest economy less than 3 weeks before the Paris Olympics. Francois Heisberg studies elections quite extensively for the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and he says when it comes to the French election, nobody won, including Marine Le Pen and his right-leaning National Rally Party, who many thought would win.
So the situation is indeed one of parliamentary confusion. There is a lesson here. They're not going to get into power under their own steam, the folks from the hard right. They're going to have to think about coalitions and about watering down the worst parts of their program. Mr. Mélenchon was probably just as surprised as everybody else by the unforeseen outcome of the elections. He's right to view it as an opportunity as far as he's concerned, essentially to create a dynamic in which his uncomfortable partners within the left-wing coalition would sort of be psychologically cowed into recognizing his primacy. We'll see whether that works.
As for the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer and his Labour Party is set to govern in the UK for the first time since 2010, after the Conservatives lost more than 200 seats. That includes former Prime Minister Liz Truss, who became the first former Prime Minister to lose a seat in close to 100 years. Starmer met with King Charles at Buckingham Palace to officially accept the role of Prime Minister. He replaces Rishi Sunak. The Labour Party secured 412 seats in Parliament versus just 121 for the Conservatives. You know, the recent snap elections in both France and the UK may hold some lessons for us here in Canada. There's been speculation that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau may send voters to the polls early, but the anti-incumbent sentiment may actually give Liberals a little bit of pause. We have more on this report from Sarah Ritchie.
The results of two recent elections in Europe may offer some insights into the mood of voters here in Canada. For over a year, there's been speculation over whether Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will send people back to the polls before the next fixed election date of October 2025. But with international examples of snap elections sending incumbents packing, the federal Conservatives maintaining a healthy lead in national polls, and speculation over whether Trudeau himself should resign, it seems less likely the Liberals will want to take that risk. French President Emmanuel Macron bet his centrist alliance on a snap vote. They lost on Sunday, although a bold maneuver to withdraw candidates appears to have thwarted the rise of a far-right party in that country. In the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party was trounced in last week's unusual July vote after 14 years in power. University of Saskatchewan professor Jerry White says neither country offers a perfect comparison for Canada, but their recent experiences may offer some insights into the sentiments that are at play here. Sarah Ritchie, The Canadian Press, Ottawa.
There's a lot of anger south of the border since the Biden administration allowed Iran's terrorist-sponsored regime to hold voting booths and allow voting in the United States. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has more.
the fact that they allowed them to participate or to bring their basically their property onto U.S. soil and to have American Iranians vote in their election is just it signals to the policy and the strategy that the White House has used for the last almost 4 years, and that it has been so dangerous and has emboldened this regime to allow them to have that kind of access here. Why should we allow that when they should be under sanction, when they should be, marginalized and basically told that they have to have a change in behavior?
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, will also have details on the health of U.S. President Joe Biden as Americans head to the polls this November. She'll have more coming up in the second half of our show. The reports that the Israeli Air Forces have eliminated a senior Hezbollah official responsible for their attack drone program. According to TBN Israeli correspondent Yair Pinto, the IDF continues to target those terrorist leaders who are the biggest threat to Israel.
We start with the news from the Northern Front, where last Wednesday, media in Lebanon reported the assassination of Muhammad Nama Nasser, known as Abu Nama, who served as a senior commander in Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah confirmed the reports, making Nasser the latest in a series of senior leaders Hezbollah has lost in recent weeks. He was, according to security sources in Lebanon, the commander of the Aziz unit, and his rank in the organization was equivalent to that of Abu Talib, who's another senior terrorist that was eliminated in an IDF strike a few weeks ago. Then, in the last 24 hours, the IDF recorded a significant achievement when it eliminated Mitam Metzafa Alter, the driving force behind Hezbollah's air warfare system, in an airstrike in the Baalbek area of central Lebanon.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, dozens were killed and more than 150 others were injured following Russian missile attacks on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities.
Шевченківський район, Сирець, ми бачимо ще одне влучання. Житловий будинок, десь приблизно 17 квартир зруйновано. Рятувальники зараз працюють, ми чуємо голоси, люди знаходяться під завалами, робимо максимально, щоб швидко врятувати цих людей. Тобто роботи йдуть і в цьому районі міста Києва. Знаємо, що і в інших районах міста Києва така ж сама ситуація. Тобто робимо все для того, щоб максимально надати допомогу, розбирати завали, врятувати людей.
Hurricane Beryl has been downgraded to a tropical storm after sweeping into Texas as a Category 1 storm with heavy rain and powerful winds. The storm caused flooding and knocked out power to at least 1.5 million homes and businesses.
I think their rating system may be kind of messed up.
How so?
It seemed like this was a lot worse than some of the other ones that they said were worse. But could have been how close we were to it.
That tree limb right there could have been through the roof of our house instead of our shed. Yeah. That one could have gone on our house instead of this way. So we'd just be grateful.
The Saskatchewan government and the union representing provincial employees have ratified a new contract. The deal provides members of the Saskatchewan government and General Employees Union annual wage increases of 3% of the first and second years to 1.67% top-up in year number 3. The union represents around 11,000 employees who work in various government ministries. A new police service in northern Alberta is getting its first officers. 2 constables with the Grand Prairie Police Service are going to be joining the RCMP later this week as part of a multi-year transition to the municipal force. They will work alongside the Mounties, who will remain the police of jurisdiction. The full transition to the Grand Prairie Service is set for the year 2026. You know, sometimes dreams do in fact come true. Les Vonkeman had a dream to become a police officer. It was realized when he joined the Lethbridge Police Service more than 20 years ago. As BCN's Heidi Echevarria explains now, Vonkeman is now one of the diversity officers with the community resource team at the LPS, who continues to make a big difference here in our community.
Friendly, compassionate, and caring is the way in which Les Vonkeman, the only Indigenous police officer in the Lethbridge Police Service, approaches our city's vulnerable communities. That is his trademark.
They definitely feel a lot more comfortable with me as a whole. Quite often they'll call me, brother or sister. And when I was in a patrol unit and I had to, deal with the crime and the dysfunction, and I would have to arrest them, then that name usually changes to something other than brother or sister, right? My last name is Vonkeman, which is not Indigenous at all, and but most people don't ask. But I do talk about my story quite a bit about you know, being part of the 60 scoop, getting scooped out of my community up in northern Alberta and getting flown to Lethbridge area, and then getting raised by Dutch people out on a farm northeast of Lethbridge here.
During his time as a police officer, Les faced resistance because of his Indigenous roots, but that did not stop him.
Times people would assume that I was just hired because they needed an Indigenous police officer. I also faced prejudice from Indigenous people that they're thinking, well, because I'm a police officer, I think I'm more important than them, and so they treat me differently. You know, I've been called all kinds of names, such as apple, right? Red on the outside, but white on the inside. I have this belief as well that we almost have to work double just to help people understand that we're not lazy, that we're here to work, we're here to do our job, and we're competent and able to do it. I rely on my spirituality, I rely on my faith in order to get that peace for myself.
He has served the Lethbridge community as a police officer for 23 years and would love to see more Indigenous people serve the way that he does.
You know, I'm looking forward to, you know, finishing off my career here as a police officer in a good way. I want to see more Indigenous officers come into the Lethbridge Police Service.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
That's a great story. The University of Lethbridge has brought a new exhibit to their art gallery. It features artwork from 10 different artists from a small hamlet in the Northwest Territories. The gallery consists primarily of stone cuts, stencils, and lithographs created from the years 1964 to 1977.
Almost all of the works in the collection, they all came from Dr. Margaret Marmee Perkins-Hess in 2017 from her bequest, and we actually renamed this gallery after her. It's really a cool opportunity to be able to experience this moment in Canadian art history. It's one of the really wonderful things about the U of L art collection is more than 15,000 artworks. We can do exhibitions on so many different topics.
Beautiful looking artwork, and a curator tour will take place on July the 18th, and the gallery will remain up until September the 28th. You know, the summer heat is hitting many regions of Canada very hard right now. Environment Canada issued heat warnings for all of Alberta, the top half of Saskatchewan, and much of the interior and west coast in British Columbia. 20 communities in BC broke record temperatures on Sunday. Temperatures were expected in the low 40s today. Heat and humidity warnings are also up for the Toronto region, along with many of the maritime provinces and northern Newfoundland and Labrador. With the mercury rising here in Lethbridge, officials are once again reminding us that public water stations are available across the city. That includes Henderson Lake Park, Nicholas Sharon Park, Legacy Park, and at Galt Gardens downtown. Hours for the spray parks at Legacy and Rotary Centennial have been extended from 10 a.m. till 8 p.m. daily. City officials also say there are a number of groups available to help those who are most vulnerable during the heat wave. That includes the YWCA Harbour House, Woods Homes, Streets Alive Mission, the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, and the Sage Clan. The town of Coaldale has released results from a spring community survey of nearly 500 residents. In it, 26% of residents say the town should spend more tax dollars on public work such as roads, sidewalks, lighting, and snow removal. 18% say more dollars should go into policing, and 18% as well say more tax dollars should go towards fire and emergency management. As for amenities, 41% of residents listed walking trails or parks and playgrounds as their favorites. 74% say they're satisfied with fire protection, and 49% say they're least satisfied with the community's roads and sidewalk repairs. For quality of life, 80% of residents say they have a high or modestly high quality of life in the town, and 95% of residents say they would recommend living in Coaldale.
Some of these items that were mentioned, like the streets, sidewalks, there was discussions about an indoor pool, a second sheet of ice. All of those are budgetary items. They come with a price tag. So when we go into our budget deliberations in the fall, this is where we talk about some of the items that were brought out in the survey so that we can budget them for future years. The big thing is and I agree with our residents, is that we need to put more funds towards repairing our streets and sidewalks. So again, that's something that we will look seriously at budget time so that we can come up with a plan moving forward.
RCMP and Innisfail are investigating a serious copper wire theft at an oil field site near Spruce View. On Saturday, police received a report that early in the morning, an unknown number of people broke into the site and stole a large amount of electrical cable, causing over $100,000 in damage to the property. Now, this follows a similar incident where RCMP and Consort arrested 2 people on July 1st in relation to thefts at another oil field lease site. The price of copper has seen a rise in recent weeks, as the cost of replacing stolen wire is typically passed on to the consumers. According to the Canadian Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, copper thefts can contribute to serious outages in telecommunications, affecting internet, TV, and cell phone services. January saw a 100% increase in copper theft and vandalism incidents year over year, with a 49% increase in outage during that time. It appears as though not many want to participate in the federal government's gun buyback program. Canada Post said they cannot make it work, and the RCMP have allegedly had issues with it. When it comes to legal firearms owned by farmers and ranchers wanting to protect themselves, Mike McCauley with the RCMP Community Safety and Wellbeing Branch says gun owners need to be very careful in rural communities.
We understand Albertans have a right to firearms, and we don't want to get in the way of that, but we do ask Albertans to lock those up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of crime guns that are stolen from good, hardworking rural Albertans that have guns for proper purposes, but they get stolen because they don't necessarily lock them up properly.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with Mike McCauley from the Alberta RCMP and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our program. The Lethbridge Intermediate AAA Cardinals are on their way to Coquitlam, British Columbia to represent Alberta in the Little League Intermediate Nationals Tournament. On Sunday night, they faced Calgary's District 8 Intermediate AAA team and won by a score of 11-5. That helped the squad claim the Intermediate Division Provincial title. Lethbridge will have a shot next week in BC to represent Team Canada in the Little League Intermediate World Series in Livermore, California. Good luck going out to the guys. Well, we've been enjoying a little bit of baseball weather here in Lethbridge, also barbecuing weather as well, with the beautiful temperatures we've received, and that trend should continue for the remainder of the week. Full weather details are on deck. We enjoyed a sizzler once again today in Lethbridge. We hit over 30 degrees. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near 16. It's looking like a pretty clear sky for the remainder of the week as well. Sunshine and a hot 33 degrees expected on Tuesday. We may even break a record on Wednesday, as we're expecting a high near 36 degrees in the city. Make sure you put on your sunscreen. Cooling off slightly on Thursday with a high of 33. 31 is on tap for Friday, and look at the weekend shaping up. Sunny and 34 for Saturday, sunshine and 33 degrees for Sunday. Now checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 25 degrees with an average low of 10. The record high was 33 degrees set back in 2001, and the record low was a chilly 4 degrees in 1971. The sun rose at 5:34 and set at 9:39. Let's see how Tuesday is looking across the country now. Lots of sunshine expected for the west coast. Expect a high of 27 degrees for Vancouver, sunny and a balmy 30 degrees for Victoria on the island. Edmonton should see a high of 34 on Tuesday, slightly cooler in Calgary under a sunny sky with a high of 31. Looking at the rest of the prairies now, it should be mainly sunny and 31 degrees in Regina. Lots of sunshine as well in Saskatoon with a high near 30. Clouds and showers are rolling into Winnipeg on Tuesday with a high expected near 29. Lots of humidity on tap for central Canada. Expect rain and a high of 31 in Toronto. Showers and 29 in Ottawa. Clouds and showers and a high of 27 degrees for Montreal. In the Atlantic region, expect rain and 30 in Fredericton. Clouds and showers and 29 in both Halifax and Charlottetown. And in St. John's, it'll be mainly cloudy with a high near 26 degrees on Tuesday. The U.S. Justice Department says Boeing has agreed to plead guilty to a criminal fraud charge stemming from 2 deadly crashes of 737 MAX jetliners that claimed 346 lives. It is now up to a federal judge whether to accept the plea and a sentence that is part of the aerospace giant's deal with U.S. prosecutors. Boeing's decision came a week after the Justice Department gave the company the choice of entering a guilty plea or face a trial. Prosecutors say Boeing violated a 2021 deal that have shielded the company from prosecution earlier. They allege Boeing committed fraud by misleading regulators about a flight control system that was implicated in the 2 MAX crashes. WestJet continues to feel the fallout from its mechanic strike with more canceled flights throughout the weekend. Tracking service FlightAware says WestJet canceled 100 trips on Friday and Saturday, plus at least 32 more on Sunday. The airline apologized to customers and said it's working to revamp operations quite quickly. Travelers, however, have posted on social media about WestJet's customer service remaining almost unreachable for days, with major problems rebooking their flights. Walmart Canada has quietly launched sensory-friendly shopping with no background music and muted televisions. Supporters say sensory-friendly hours are an affordable and easy way for businesses to make shopping easier for people who have disabilities or are sensitive to busy environments. Walmart is offering the subdued experience at all 403 of its locations, Monday through Wednesday from opening until 10 a.m. Toy chain Mastermind, grocer Sobeys, and movie theater chain Cineplex are also dabbling in the practice. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 67 points on the day to finish at 22,059. The Dow was down 31 points to 39,344. The S&P 500 was up 5 points on the day to 5572, and the Nasdaq was up 50 points to 18,403. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 89 cents to 82.27 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 2.37 U.S. Gold was down 33.03 on the day to 23.59.13 U.S. an ounce, and silver was down 46 cents to $30.76 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.89 per bushel, barley's at $5.92, canola's at $14.71, and corn is at $7.16 per bushel. Live cattle August contract was down $2.08 to $184.35. Feeder cattle August contract was down $2.30 to $259.18, and lean hogs were down 20 cents to 89.68. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.33 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, the summer heat is hitting many regions of Canada pretty hard right now. Environment Canada issued heat warnings for all of Alberta, the top half of Saskatchewan, and much of the interior and west coast in BC. 20 communities in British Columbia broke record temperatures on Sunday. Temperatures were expected in the low 40s today. Heat and humidity warnings are also on tap for the Toronto region, along with many of the maritime provinces and northern Newfoundland and Labrador. There were a number of surprises when it came to both the recent UK and France elections. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will explain in more details shortly. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Street Wheelers Car Club in Lethbridge presents their annual Street Machine Weekend, taking place July 12th to the 14th. Make it a fun family event Friday night as all kinds of vintage classic, sport, and muscle cars and trucks cruise down 3rd Avenue South in Mayor McGrath. Then on Saturday at the Exhibition Park Grandstand, enjoy the loud, raw power of these vehicles as they race for the fastest time in the grand tradition of drag racing. Then finish the weekend on Sunday with the ultimate show and shine showcase taking place in downtown Lethbridge at Galt Gardens. So much to see and do at Street Wheeler Street Machine Weekend. Discover homegrown produce and homemade products at the downtown farmers market at Festival Square in Lethbridge. Every Wednesday until September, beginning at 9 a.m., you'll find many local vendors selling fresh fruit and vegetables, delicious baked goods, homemade soaps, and so much more. Enjoy the relaxing atmosphere and support local producers and artisans at the same time. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Iran has a new president. The European Union welcomed the victory of reformist candidate Masoud Pezeshkian. He's a heart surgeon, a lawmaker, and former health minister. Now, what will this mean for the people of Iran and us here in the West? To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, first of all, any surprise with this election victory?
Well, it's not really an election, it's more of a selection. So different tyrants, same tyranny. You set up the intro to this question beautifully, except you didn't do the air quotes for reformist, because that's exactly what it is. He's not a reformist. Anyone who had a chance in this election had to be part of and cut from the cloth of this regime, which is tyranny. It is murderous, it is terroristic, and you have to agree with that. You have to be on board with that in order to run. Now, he may have a different day job, but we know that he has a history of supporting this regime. He has a history of supporting the Revolutionary Guard. He has a history of supporting hijab for women and boasted about that. I have a lot of that on my social media and just supporting a lot of what he's done in the past. But just to tell people, especially the media, the mainstream media in the West, who is just fawning over this reformist, the first reformist candidate in 2 decades. No, it's nothing like that. There's going to be no changes because everything that goes on in that country has to be basically approved by the entire regime. And of course, the supreme leader, who has not changed. That is Khamenei, and that has not changed. And again, remember, anyone who had, again, run for this election had to be approved by the council, and therefore is going to be from the same mindset and ideology. So nothing will change, unfortunately. In fact, a lot of people feel like this is a drawback because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So someone who can perhaps approach the West, dupe the West further, get more money out of the West, but behind the scenes be continuing with their nuclear program, with supporting, of course, the proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others, and continue with their dirty work. So I don't think we're going to see any change, unfortunately. But the one thing I will say, and I'll end with this, is that we saw the lowest voter turnout that we've ever seen in Iran, and that is the people speaking. We have seen a referendum. We've seen the people saying, we don't care who's running. It could be Mickey Mouse. We're not going to legitimize this regime by voting and participating in this election.
Now, speaking of the vote, Lisa, there was also outrage that U.S. President Joe Biden allowed Iran's terrorist-sponsored regime to hold voting in the United States.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the most maddening things that could have happened, given the fact that Iran's regime has American blood on its hands, the fact that they have American hostages, the fact that right now we see hostages that Hamas has that are American. That is Iran's proxy. So it is, the same hand. The fact that they allowed them to participate or to bring their property onto U.S. soil and to have American Iranians vote in their election is just it signals to the policy and the strategy that the White House has used for the last 3, almost 4 years, and that it has been so dangerous and has emboldened this regime to allow them to have that kind of access here. Why should we allow that when they should be under sanction? When they should be, marginalized and basically told that they have to have a change in behavior. They have to stop supporting terror proxies. They have to stop shooting at U.S. assets in the Red Sea. I mean, imagine they're shooting at us and we're allowing them to bring their polling boxes here on U.S. soil. So a lot of people were outraged, and very rightfully so.
The terrorist group Hamas informed another terrorist organization, Hezbollah. It had agreed to a proposal for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. But Lisa, we're continuing to see tensions escalate, however, between Hezbollah and Israel on the Jewish state's northern border with Lebanon.
Absolutely. And there are many, many fires raging right now in northern Israel, coming from missiles that were fired by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon into Israel. And this has been continuing on for a long time now, even before October 7th. But I think a lot of people feel like this war is just starting. No, it was going on before, and even on October 7th, October 8th, October 9th, there were missiles coming into northern Israel from Hezbollah. This is not something that Israel wanted to escalate too quickly. Obviously, the Ayatollah in Tehran is pulling the puppet strings and really trying to do this war of attrition, having Israel fight and fight with all its might against Hamas, but then save its more or better endowed terror proxy Hezbollah for the next front of this war? Well, it has been going on, but I think that this escalation points to the fact that, well, the Hamas war is dwindling down. Let's start the next fight. And with regards to the IDF and the way that they are approaching this, my sources tell me they have always calculated that this war is going to begin. It was only a calculation of when and not if this war would begin. And they are well prepared to tackle this next front as well, very unfortunately, because this is just, senseless wars that are just, again, being puppeteered by Iran's regime. And it seems like Israel has no choice but to fight the tentacles and not be able to fight the actual source of the problem, which is Iran's regime.
A video posted on social media recently allegedly shows members of Hamas beating blindfolded and handcuffed civilians after they were caught taking humanitarian aid that was being hoarded in a Gaza warehouse being controlled by the terrorist group.
Right. And thank you, Hal, for bringing attention to this story, because you don't see this story and because it doesn't fit the narrative of the mainstream media. Where is the aid? Why are the people of Gaza starving? Well, there is plenty of aid. There's more aid going in there than there has been in a very long time. But where is that aid? Well, it's being hoarded and being stolen and being kept by Hamas. They are setting prices that are incredibly high. They are abusing the Gazan people. They have been abusing the Gazan people for a very long time. I remember a decade ago, I did a story on the people of Hamas the people of Gaza rather lashing out at Hamas as their leadership. But of course, they kill, they beat, they brutalize anybody who dares to speak out against Hamas. So we're looking for the brave people of Gaza to speak out and tell the world what they are dealing with, and that is this brutality of living under Hamas. That answers the question of where all this aid is. So there are videos now that show that this aid was hoarded by Hamas, of course, not giving it to the people, and the people who dared to go steal for their families were beaten very, very brutally. We had to kind of, we put a warning on the video, but it is up on the foreign desk if anybody wants to see it.
Let's talk about what's happening in the United Kingdom as well, Lisa. Labour is set to govern in the UK for the first time since 2010 after the Conservatives lost more than 200 seats. And that includes former Prime Minister Liz Truss, who became the first former PM to lose a seat in close to 100 years.
Yeah, this is, it's an interesting development, because we have always talked about the last few years how Europe is moving to the right because of many of the policies that have been very damaging, and there's buyer's remorse on a lot of the immigration policies, therefore changing the changing just the population and changing a lot of the laws and changing a lot of the character of Europe. And while migration is wonderful, it seems like there's less assimilation that is leading to that change in character. This kind of flips the script a bit, and now we're looking at the opposite. We're looking at a lot of the leftists coming into government and the right losing its voice. This is a continuation, Hal, and we talk about this a lot here. It's happening in the United States, but it seems like it happens in Europe first, and then it happens in the United States next. The pendulum swinging, right? One extreme, next extreme, one extreme to next extreme, until we find that equilibrium, which it seems like because of this ping-ponging back and forth, we have not found an equilibrium. But all throughout the world, we're seeing extreme left, extreme right. And the people, it seems like, across the board are in the middle, and they want common sense policies that keep them safe, that keep their children safe, and give them a better life, give them prosperity, give them a chance at all those things. We shall see what will happen in the next few years, but I do think this is a very important moment, and it happened on the 4th of July, so it's pretty historic all across the board.
Now, speaking of elections here, a coalition of left-wing parties is projected to finish first in France's snap elections. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance is expected to finish second, and Lisa, the populist National Rally Party, is projected to come in third.
Yeah, again, very, very interesting because when you see the protests on the streets, right? So I saw something, it was meant to be a funny meme, but there is some truth to it, where if the left loses, they're protesting on the streets. When the left wins, they're protesting on the streets. So is it really about the election, or is it just about destroying society? And, that's a lot of what we're seeing. We saw the protests overnight in France. And, again, you think about about the people who live there. If you love your country, why are you protesting? Why are you destroying property? We saw a lot of signs for Gaza, a lot of signs for death to Jews. I mean, what does that have to do with an election in France? All across the board, we're seeing a lot of these themes repeat themselves. And Hal, I'm sorry to say, this is one extreme and this is the pendulum, but we're seeing Europe go in a way that there will be more buyer's remorse coming their way.
Well, the U.S. presidential election, as you know, is coming up in November, Lisa. Many are quite concerned with the mental health of both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But now there's a new report that says Biden's personal physician met with a Parkinson's disease specialist at the White House. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is basically an investigative report that looks at, what truly is going on with Joe Biden, right? The debate, yes, a lot of people were like, well, we saw for the first time. Well, it's not the first time. If you actually look at a lot of the footage, you see that he's been declining very rapidly. And the media and the White House and his family have been hiding that from the world, and truthfully hiding it from those who want to be fooled, because many of us saw this happening in real time. And now, the question remains, how about national security? How about what does Iran's regime or Russia or China think about these developments when you have somebody who's not, just cognitively, there and not able to run a country? This is the most important job in the world, and I say that without hyperbole. And now, there's questions about whether or not he is healthy enough to do that. And as you said, the question remains: why do we have two candidates who are above 70? And that also remains a question of, strength and cognitive ability and stamina and all those things. So now, all eyes are on Joe Biden, his family, his ability to serve this country. And really, I think a lot of people right now are hoping that this country can put, partisan politics aside for the election and choose the person who can best govern us going forward. Unfortunately, just like Europe, it's very left, very right. And although a lot of people are in the middle, you don't hear those voices as much as we should.
How vulnerable will this really make the United States? As you mentioned, China, Russia's watching the proceedings right now, and the mental capacity of the American president. Will China say, you know what, now's a great time to invade Taiwan?
Absolutely. And I think they made that calculation long before this debate. Look, for 4 years, even before the election between Trump and Biden in 2020, there was this vulnerability where the Iran regime, Russia, and China had an opinion. They had a voice in who should become president. Now, whether they actually participated in the elections or not, we don't need to talk about that. But the fact that they even had a say, I translated a lot of articles coming from Iran where the regime was actually hoping that Joe Biden would win, obviously, because the policies under Trump didn't serve them. But to think that our foreign policy is different between presidents, and so different that a tyrannical government wants to have a say in who becomes president of the United States, that is an embarrassment. There should be no daylight between presidents when it comes to dealing with our friends and our enemies abroad. Israel shouldn't worry about where they stand, regardless of who comes into office. The Iran regime shouldn't think that they will have either a heyday or they will be shut down based on who comes into office. And I think that is a bigger signal to us going forward that our national security, whether there should be another, God forbid, 9/11 on U.S. soil, what happens to us in the Red Sea when the Houthis are shooting at us, when we have American hostages being held by Hamas, that should not, that should be the same calculations, whether it's a Democrat or Republican or independent in office. And I really hope, I think, foreign policy has never been a main issue. And I understand that people want to put food on the table. People care about jobs. People care about other things. But right now, when we're looking at the border, we're looking at China, we're looking at the Middle East, we're looking at, the fact that there are so many, migrants here that have been detected on the terror list, on the FBI's most wanted list. There are others who have not yet been detected, and that's even scarier. Foreign policy, national security should become a main stage and main center issue of this election going forward because of the vulnerability that you mentioned.
Hurricane Beryl has left a swath of destruction in the Caribbean, and now the storm is set to hit the Texas coast as it regains hurricane-level strength, Lisa, in the Gulf of Mexico. Are we talking about potential evacuations here?
that we might be. Texas, all of the border states have dealt with a lot, and inclement weather and storms are something that they are used to dealing with. If they need to evacuate, if they need to put up boards, they know how to handle that. But I think in the next few hours, we should find out how severe this will be, but the warnings are out.
American correspondent and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining us from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Albertans should be able to feel safe in their homes and communities, whether they live in a big city or a rural area. But over the last number of years, we've been hearing a lot of complaints about increasing rural crime. However, today's guest has some encouraging news in this area. Joining us is RCMP Superintendent Mike McCulley from the Community Safety and Well-Being Branch. Welcome to Bridge City News, Mike. Great to have you on today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, so tell us about the good news here. Apparently, rural crime in most of southern Alberta has actually decreased since 2023.
Yeah, it's I looked at the numbers again. It's funny because in my branch, I'm in charge of crime reduction, and we focus more on offenders. We focus more on the root causes of crime versus the numbers. Of course, the numbers are important. They do tell a story, but there's so little we can control about that. But it is extremely positive to hear that many of the main drivers of crime in rural Alberta and especially in southern Alberta have decreased. Break-in enters are down 18% over the same period of last year. Theft of motor vehicles are down around 22%, and theft of over 5,000 down around 17%. So those are very encouraging numbers.
That is really encouraging. I know, I was looking at some stats as well from what you guys, RCMP, are saying. So from January to March, it looks like compared to the same period last year, there have been even fewer person crime offenses, person against person, I guess that is, 76 less, 213 fewer property crimes, and 373 less total criminal code offenses. And like you said, break-in enters dropped 18.4% in vehicles. So what do you think is leading to this wonderful news that it's we're seeing this significant decrease?
Yeah, so there's a few things I'll speak to. To be completely blunt, there's not a lot we can do to control the numbers. There's work we can do to, again, we tackle the root causes of crime. We tackle the root causes of victimization. And I think, and I'll share some of that. And all we can do is do the best we can in those areas and to provide the most programming to help Albertans and to try and counteract this. But I can tell you that in the last 5 years, there's actually been around 33% drop in those key property crime areas in southern Alberta, which is massive. And in 2020, they created the position I'm in now. I wasn't the original member in that position, but they created the crime reduction strategy portion of policing in Alberta, and they really put a focus on rural crime and a focus on tackling those root causes. And we saw a major decrease that first year and a half, and then it leveled off a little bit. And in 2 years ago, we created the Community Safety Wellbeing Branch, which is an even more enhanced, robust strategy when it comes to tackling these issues. And we're starting to see the benefits of that. Mm-hmm. I will give a lot of credit to the frontline members because the hardworking frontline members, if they're not there to do the policing, none of this matters. None of the programming we can create from a headquarters perspective and a strategy perspective works without those hardworking, dedicated frontline members and our community partners that embrace it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, is this the first significant decrease that we've seen in southern Alberta rural crime in several years, or has it been sort of declining for some time now, or do you really attribute it to sort of what you guys are doing, just the difference that's made?
Well, I'd like to take some credit.
Of course.
In the provincial RCMP realm, again, it's been a big focus for the last 5 years, and we have seen the gains in the last 5 years. But it is very promising. These specific stats that brought us here today, it's very promising, and we're going to hopefully continue that trend. the biggest shift we've had, especially in the last, I'll say, year and a half, is again to develop stronger partnerships. We have partnerships with nonprofit agencies. We have partnerships with community groups. We have partnerships with AHS to tackle drug addiction, to tackle mental health, and to really, again, focus on the root causes. Because what we found is that it's all fine. You know, yes, police have a role to arrest people that commit crimes, and we're happy to do that, and we do it well. But what we've had to shift from, and it is a shift, I would say it's a relatively global shift, is to not just tackle that, but also to walk upstream. So we use the stream analogy. If you picture us, a beautiful stream, and coming down your screen there, at the bottom is where we pick people up and have to arrest them, or perhaps they're in the depths of drug addiction, and that's why they're committing crimes. And often our social services and police and first responders deal with people at their worst at the bottom of that stream. What we've tried to do is, how about we walk upstream and find out why they're falling in and ending up in that sad state of affairs at the end of that cesspool, and try and work on some of those reasons before we get there. And I think there's been some good success.
That sounds really practical too.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's when you start doing it, it's yeah, of course, I can keep the cycle going and arresting, and the person gets back on the street. And if we don't give them support and services for, again, addiction is a big driver of crime. If we don't try and partner and find the most, as you said, common sense and realistic solutions for these folks to break that cycle, then we're just going to be keeping the same methods going, and it's probably not going to have any success.
Yeah, revolving door for sure. I would imagine that one of the challenges for policing is the huge geographical areas that RCMP have to cover. And, of course, slow response times sometimes can come along with that. So would more officers obviously would be helpful, right? But that normally isn't it's not usually in the budget, right? For government budget to increase the fleet. So have we seen any increases in the number of officers in rural areas or not?
Yeah, so with in recent years, there's a thing, and I won't bore you with the details, but called the police funding model. So in smaller communities have had to change their funding structure to pay and contribute towards policing. And what that's done is it's given us, an increase in resources. There has been, over the last 4 years, there has been an increase. It's not as simple as putting a police officer in every corner. That just doesn't work, to be honest. It's about coming up with an overall strategy to increase numbers where they are needed, 100% in the front lines, but also to come up with supports and different strategies. So I'll give an example is the crime reduction units that exist. So Southern Alberta and every other RCMP district has a crime reduction unit where their focus is on the highest, the criminals that create the most amount of harm for their communities. And having a team like that, what we've found is you take the top, say 10, or in our case, we deal with the top 100 offenders in the province. And of course, there are some in Southern Alberta. If we focus our energy on those folks, it can actually reduce crime a great deal, because it's not just catching someone who's maybe stealing a loaf of bread. It's going and trying to capture and keep in jail those folks that are causing an enormous amount of harm in communities. Our studies have found, and we use the crime severity index as a measuring stick for our top 100 offenders. And yes, there's the violent offenders that might commit one crime, one heinous crime, and that obviously raises their stats. But we have people that commit over and over again robberies and break and enters and domestic violence, and it's a repeat, as you said, like the revolving doors type of system. We're focusing on those folks, in addition to responding to calls and doing other preventive policing. But by focusing on those folks, if we take them off the street and spend some more time building bail packages and building assistance for the Crown to hopefully get those folks held in jail longer and get longer sentencing, then we're actually preventing a lot more crime than we are if we just kind of take a shotgun approach and try and tackle all of the problems that exist.
When it comes to like the crime of theft or property theft, are there any specific items that thieves are targeting? Is it mainly machinery and vehicles, or what are you seeing sort of in those rural areas?
I don't know if there's any specific things. What I will say is that vehicles are a huge problem in Alberta, as theft of vehicles. We do a lot of programming. In the wintertime, we do Project Cold Start, which is focusing on the fact that people leave their vehicles running and go into stores. But outside of that, and especially in rural communities, folks will leave their keys on their dashboard or leave them under their visor and leave the car unlocked. 50% of vehicles are found to be stolen with the keys in the car. That is a massive number. So yes, most of the time criminals are doing crimes of opportunity. So yes, they'll go onto a rural property and they'll see what's out and about. If there's a shed open, that's where they're going to tackle looking for items, and they'll take whatever's available. So it is about target hardening. It is about taking some extra steps. My uncle has a beautiful ranch in Okotoks in southern Alberta, and we've traveled and visit him often. And I'm always telling him, and I think of him as our other great Albertans down south, is saying, yes, you have a beautiful community here, but people will potentially come and look and see, if your door is locked, or look and see if your vehicles are locked. And if the keys are there, that's what they're going to target. If not, they'll move on to the next property. So there is a lot of steps we can take to try and prevent that.
Definitely. I think rural residents probably don't have that tendency to lock up things as diligently as city dwellers do they?
Yeah, 100%. And I love that about rural Alberta and rural Canada. Canada is a safe place. Let's be very honest about this. It's a safe place. However, there's going to be people that'll disrupt that peace. And small steps like locking your doors at night, closing your garage, locking up your sheds, that does do a massive amount of prevention when it comes to rural crime.
And I understand that roughly half of rural crimes happen between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., right? So can you maybe tell us about something called the 9 p.m. routine?
Yeah, so a 9 p.m. routine, and I'll refer back to my uncle. When we go to visit him with my kids, we go and do chores. The rural crime chore or rural property chores that you have to do, whether it's feeding animals, whether it's just taking care of the property. My suggestion to all rural Albertans, and all Albertans to be honest, is at that time when you're doing your nightly chores, do those extra steps. Like make sure that you leave lights on in strategic areas that you typically do. Make sure you lock up the barn if you have expensive equipment in there. Lock your vehicles up. If you have surveillance cameras, make sure that they're turned on and they're active and working. Close your doors. Do those little things. If you drive by your neighbor's house, in the middle of the night and you see that their garage is open, make a quick phone call and get them to close it. Right. All of those little steps truly will make neighborhoods safer, and you'll be less likely to be victimized.
Yeah, that kind of comes back to that rural crime watch, almost like the neighborhood watch, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's bring up a great partner of ours. The Rural Crime Watch is a great partner. We have Citizens on Patrol as partners. All of these things, I call them force multipliers. Police can't be on every corner, as we've said. So if you have the more eyes and ears that are out there is absolutely to our benefit. And it prevents crime, but it can provide intelligence. So we truly encourage every Albertan, if you see something even remotely suspicious, call us, please. Maybe it's nothing this time, but maybe it will lead us to understanding more trends and more patterns, and allow us to better serve the communities and better prevent crime.
Now, over the years, of course, there's been a lot of debate and controversy over what rural property owners can and can't do to protect themselves. So what are the rules, especially when it comes to using, say, firearms or some other kind of force to protect your own home?
So I'll be completely frank. I get this question a lot, and I'm not going to get into the specific rules and intricacies. Every situation is different, but I will give advice. I'm good at giving advice. My advice is 100%, and you bring up a good point for firearms. When we talk about the 9 o'clock rule, we talk about target hardening. I'm actually in the middle of starting a program that's going to be coming through in the near future about an education program on firearms. We understand Albertans have a right to firearms, and we don't want to get in the way of that. But we do ask Albertans to lock those up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of crime guns that are stolen from good, hardworking rural Albertans that have guns for proper purposes, but they get stolen because they don't necessarily lock them up properly. So that is an item that is important. Now, getting back to your question, because I'm not dodging your question, my advice is this: there's nothing on your property that's worth yourself or your family members getting hurt for. There's just not. So, if you have an option to flee, if you have an option to get out of any situation, whether that's on a rural property, whether that's on a city property, whether that's in a storefront where you are observing crime, leave the crime fighting to the professionals. We're trained. We have proper tools. And that's just that. At the end of the day, I can't get into specifics. There's so much nuance to what could get you in trouble or not get in trouble. But I will say there's very few chances that you won't have to escape. And the fight or flight, when it comes to a criminal on your property, it should be flight. You should be trying to get out of there with your family and loved ones as safely as possible, and avoid any confrontation with any people that are on your property for legal purposes.
All right. Well, great advice there. Thanks so much for being with us today, Mike. Looks like we're out of time, but appreciate having you on today.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Mike McCauley is the superintendent with the Alberta RCMP Community Safety and Wellbeing Branch. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.